Hello! Today I'm going to change the front disc brakes for a 2005 Hyundai Tucson. And it's not going to be very difficult. You just need some basic tools and step-by-step instructions. First, make sure your vehicle is parked on a level ground and jack it up and remove the tire. Either you can use a four-way, or if you're lucky, have an air compressor and an air ratchet. So go ahead and proceed to take the tire off. Right, now here are the tools to replace the disc pads in your 2005 Hyundai. You'll need a floor jack, 2 jack stands, a four-way, the disc brake pads, the brake grease. You'll need a light, an 8-inch C-clamp, an anti-seize thread lube, 14mm or a 9/16 wrench, 18mm wrench, hammer, screwdriver, gloves, towel, yes, it's going to be a dirty job, and a footstool to sit on while you're doing the job. All right, I have removed the tire, and here is the caliper, and you're going to remove that. This is your rotor. And your caliper bolts, there's 2 of them, one right here and one right below. And for the 2005 Hyundai, a 14mm or a 9/16 should do the job. If you can't loosen it up with your own strength, you go ahead and just tap it with a hammer, just like that, very carefully, and loosen that up and take the bolts out. I have loosened them up, and now I'm going to take the caliper bolts out, lay them over on a towel, and you can pull this caliper adjuster back, and you just remove this, just kind of wiggle it, and the caliper should just come right out. Do not hit it with anything. It's cast iron, you don't want to break it. You just wiggle it back and forth and it'll come right out. And when you do that, once it's out, be very careful of the brake line. What we're going to do is take wire, and we're going to hook it through here, twist it up, and then we're going to put it up here and out of our way, making sure we do not kink this brake line right here. So that's the next step. All right, I had a little difficulty removing the caliper. It was catching on something, so I did not use a hammer, but I took a hammer and a block of wood and gently tapped the caliper off. It was caught on a little piece of metal or something, and so you could do it that way. And now I put the wire in and strung it up here so it's out of the way. As you can see, the brake line is not kinked, and so now that the caliper is out of the way, and there's the plunge, and that's what tightens your brakes. That applies pressure to it, and that's what makes you stop. That'll be the next step on how to push that plunger back in. So right now, we're going to take the brake pad off, and you can take a screwdriver and just gently pry it off of the slides. These slides right here for the 2005 Hyundai. Sometimes they have grooves, but this one's got a slide on here, right here, and there's another one right here. You just can easily remove that. When you do it both sides at the same time. There's a little piece of metal here. Pull that right out. It should come right out. Now, I'm wearing gloves. I recommend that because it's a little dirty, and these are getting worn. They were chirping a bit, so I figured go ahead and change them out. And then, as you can see, here's the slide. And what you're going to do next, we're going to take a cleaner and clean these slides off, because that's what the brake pad sits on, and it slides. And so I'm going to clean those off very, very well. And make sure that you're in a well ventilated area. You do not want to breathe this stuff in. It's very toxic. So we're on to the next step. All right, on this step you can see that I thoroughly cleaned where the caliper sets in. It's the caliper slider. It's got all nice and shiny. This is the time you check your rotor on this side and on this side. Make sure that it's not warped or a big groove in it. These look very well. I do not need to replace them. And so I'm going to go ahead and put caliper lube on it, or brake grease, and just generously put that on there. That's what helps the brake pads slide so they don't seize up. So go ahead and do that on the bottom and on the top. Well, you can see that I have put the brake grease onto the caliper slide. So I'm going to put it right there. And then you just gently line up the grooves on the brake pad with the caliper. You might have to move this little shield right here. Just use your other hand and just pull that back. But you should be able to just push the brake pad into it, and then it should sit right in there. And I did the back one. So I have the back one in, same way as the front. And there you go. Now your pads are in there. So I will show you the next step on how to push the plunger back into the caliper. Alright, so now I took the caliper down off the wire, and you see here's your plunger, and when the brake is applied, pressure goes through and pushing the brake fluid through the brake line and pushes this plunger into the back brake, which then tightens up the brake pads onto the rotor, and that's how you stop. And what you need to do now that you have new brakes and that they are much thicker than your old brake pads, we're going to push this plunger in. And what I'm going to do is show you with a C-clamp and the old brake pad, and we're going to lay that brake pad right here and use the C-clamp to push it in very gently. You can see what I've done here. I have taken the old brake pad and laid it right on top of the plunger, and then I've taken this 8-inch C-clamp and I put it around the caliper, and what I'm going to do is going to squeeze the plunger back in. Now make sure that the caliper tip is right on the base here, not near the brake line. You don't want to put it near the brake line. Make sure it's seated very flat, and then put that screw nut right on top of the brake pad, and we're going to slowly tighten it. Right. See the placement of the caliper. I put the bottom tip right here, away from where the brake line goes in to the plunger, and then we have the old brake pad sitting on the plunger, and I had screwed it tight very slowly. We don't want to push any pressure back through the brake line, and then we'll have brake fluid oozing out of the brake compartment, the brake fluid compartment that's in the engine. That could happen. But if you do it slowly and compress that plunger back down, this is how it should look. If you have someone that can help you hold the caliper, because it is cast iron, it's very heavy, that would be optimal. But you can do it like I have, with one hand holding the caliper and then the other hand screwing it down tight. And so this is how you want the plunger to be, this flat, nice and flat. So now you'll be able to put the caliper back over the new pads. Okay, now I am just placing the caliper back on, and these right up here should push right in, and you just line that right up, top and the bottom, and then you're going to put your caliper bolts right in there. Grab a caliper bolt, and that, make sure you line that up. You're going to have to move this caliper around just to get these all lined up so the bolt goes in easily. I suggest getting some anti-seize lube to put on here. A lot of rain and road debris gets on here and it starts rusting, and these bolts can rust very easily and seize up, and then you're going to have to take it into a mechanic and have them try to loosen these out and replace them. So the best is to put anti-seize lube on there. And we'll move on to the next step. Now I feel that this is the most tedious, is to get the caliper bolts in here and get them to start threading in here. Now you're just going to have to keep moving this caliper around and just try to get it to start threading, and you get the top one started, and then you can work on the bottom one. So I got it in here. That's the only part that can be a little tedious, is just keep moving this caliper around and to get that bolt threaded. And now when you get to that part, you're just about finished, and then you get your full 14 millimeter wrench out to start tightening it up. And you just want it tight, a good snug tight. Do not over tighten it. You do not want to strip out that bolt. And then we'll move on to that. All right, so we're at the part where we're going to tighten up this caliper bolt. Have your 18 millimeter on the slider nut, and then you got your 14 millimeter here, and then you make sure that you tighten it up clockwise, and just use both hands to do that and tighten it up nice and snug, and do that for the bottom. Okay, now that you have tightened up your caliper bolts on the top and on the bottom, you have completed replacing the disc brakes on the 2005 Hyundai. All you do now is get your tire, place it back on, and tighten up your lug nuts and release the jack, and to lower your vehicle, and go ahead and do the same steps on the other side. Here is a tip on how to properly tighten your lug nuts. Make sure you snug tight on one, and then you skip the next one and you move to that one, and you snug tight this one, you skip this one and snug tight. Now you're back up to the first one you did. Now the one you skipped, you snug tight, you skip that one and you snug tight. Now all of them have been tightened, tightened all around, and now you do the same thing. Now you snug tight a bit more, skip, snug tight a bit more, skip, snug tight a bit more, and until you're completely around. And that will make sure that your tire is snug and tight, not over tightened. And now you have completed your front disc brake. Congratulations. Now on to the final step. Okay, this is your last and final step. Get into your vehicle, turn it on, put your foot on your brake pad and push down. You will notice that you don't have any pressure, but that's okay. You just keep pushing down on your brake pad very gently. And what's happening is now the brake plunger that you had pushed back in is now being compressed up against your new brake pads. And you just do this a couple times, and now you have completed your brake job. Congratulations.